It's an early February morning in 1855 in the quiet county of Devon, England. The night before, the land was blanketed by a thick layer of snow, but as dawn breaks, an eerie discovery awaits. Across the frozen countryside, stretching for miles, a single line of strange footprints weaves through the snow. These were no ordinary tracks. Measuring 1 inch to 2.5 inches wide, the prints resembled cloven hooves, rather like the shoe of a donkey. And for several miles the tracks continued in a straight line, crossing rivers, climbing walls, and even passing over the roofs of houses. There was no sign of any stopping or resting. The prints were visible in several villages, not just in one place, leading some to speculate that the track maker must have travelled over 100 miles in total. The people of Devon had never seen anything like it. News of the strange footprints spread quickly, and by mid-February, local and national newspapers had picked up the story, fueling curiosity and fear. Witnesses in multiple villages shared similar accounts, and journalists scrambled to explain just exactly what had happened. The Exeter and Plymouth Gazette, Saturday, 17th February, 1855. The mysterious footprints. To the editor of the Exeter and Plymouth Gazette, Sir, Thursday night, the 8th of February, was marked by a heavy fall of snow, followed by rain and boisterous wind from the east, and in the morning, frost. The return of daylight revealed the ramblings of some most busy and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity, as its footprints were to be seen in all kinds of unaccountable places, on the tops of houses, narrow walls in gardens, and courtyards, enclosed by high walls and palings, as well as in the open fields. The creature seems to have frolicked about through Exmouth, Littleham, Lympstone, Woodbury, Topsham, Staircross, Tynemouth, etc., etc. There is hardly a garden in Lympstone where his footprints are not observable, and in this parish he appears to have gambolled with inexpressible activity. Its track appears more like that of a biped than a quadruped, and the steps are generally 8 inches in advance of each other, although in some cases 12 or 14, and are alternate, like the steps of a man, and would be included between two parallel lines 6 inches apart. The impression of the foot closely resembles that of a donkey's shoe. The Bedfordshire Mercury, Saturday 24th of February 1855. The fearful footprints. Considerable sensation has been caused in the towns of Topsham, Lympstone, Exmouth, Tynemouth and Dawlish in the south of Devon in consequence of the discovery of a vast number of foot tracks of a most strange and mysterious description. The superstitious go so far as to believe that they are marks of Satan himself, and that great excitement has been produced among all classes may be judged of from the fact that the subject has been descanted upon from the pulpit. It appears that on Thursday night week there was a heavy fall of snow in the neighbourhood of Exeter and the south of Devon. On the following morning the inhabitants of the above town were surprised at discovering the footmarks of some strange and mysterious animal endowed with the power of ubiquity, as the footprints were to be seen in all kinds of unaccountable places, on the tops of houses and narrow walls, in gardens and courtyards enclosed with high walls and palings, as well as in open fields. At present it remains a mystery, and many superstitious people in the above towns are actually afraid to go outside their doors at night. The Southern Times and Dorset County Herald, Saturday the 10th of March, 1855. The mysterious footprints. The interest in this matter has scarcely yet subsided, many inquiries still being made into the origin of the footprints, which caused so much consternation on the morning of the 8th ult. In addition to the circumstances mentioned a little while since, it may be stated that at Dawlish a number of persons sallied out armed with guns and other weapons for the purpose, if possible, of discovering and destroying the animal, which was supposed to have been so busy in multiplying its footmarks. As might have been expected, the party returned as they went. Various speculations have been made as to the cause of the footprints, and some have asserted that they are those of a kangaroo, whilst others affirm that they are the impressions of the claws of some large birds driven on shore by stress of weather. On more than one occasion reports have been circulated that an animal from a menagerie has been caught, but that matter at present is as much involved in mystery as ever it was. The Morpeth Herald, Saturday the 3rd of March, 1855. Footmarks on the snow in Devon. During the night of the 8th ult, footmarks of a strange character presented themselves on the snow in some parts of Devonshire, a description of which may be gathered from the following extract. The marks which appeared on the snow, which lay very thinly on the ground at the time, and which were seen on the Friday morning, to all appearance were the perfect impression of a donkey's hoof, the length 4 inches by 2¼ inches, but instead of progressing as that animal would have done, or indeed as any other would have done, feet right and left, it appeared that the foot had followed foot, in a single line, the distance from each tread being 8 inches or rather more, the footmarks in every parish being exactly the same size and the steps the same length. This mysterious visitor generally pressed once down across each garden or courtyard, and did so in nearly all the houses in many parts of several towns, as also in the farms scattered about, this regular track passing in some instances over the roofs of houses and haystacks and very high walls, one of them was 14 feet, without displacing the snow on either side, or altering the distance between the feet, and passing as if the wall had not been any impediment. The gardens with high fences or walls and gates locked were equally visited as those open and unprotected. Now, when we consider the distance that must have been gone over to leave these marks, I may say in almost every garden or doorstep throughout the extensive woods of Luscombe, upon commons, in enclosures and farms, the actual progress must have exceeded 100 miles. It's very easy for people to laugh at these appearances and account for them in an idle way. At present, no satisfactory solution has been given. No known animal could have traversed this extent of country in one night, besides having to cross any estuary of the sea 2 miles broad. Neither does any known animal walk in a line of single footsteps, not even man. The writer then proceeds to show the footmarks were not those of a bird. On the same morning, the footprints of men, birds and animals were plainly defined, but so much was this impression clearer than these that the raising of the frog of the foot could plainly be seen. So that means the centre of the foot, not a frog's footprint. It appeared as clearly as if cut with a diamond or branded with a hot iron. In one instance, this track entered a covered shed and passed through it, out of a broken part of the wall at the other end, where the atmosphere could not affect it. These reports, of course, added fuel to the fire, didn't they? But the real question remained, who or what had made these prints? Was it an animal? Was it a human? Or was it something else entirely? One of the earliest and most rational theories was that the prints had been made by an animal, perhaps a hopping hare or a fox. A hare, for instance, leaves behind paired prints which can resemble hoof marks under certain conditions, but hares don't travel for hundreds of miles in a straight line, nor do they scale walls and cross rivers. Foxes too leave small prints, but they rarely walk in a perfectly straight line, and their paw marks lack the distinctive cloven hoof shape that so frightened the villagers. There's an interesting note in this letter to the Derbyshire Advertiser and Journal in March of 1855 about the mark of a bird's wing that was found near some of the prints. Mysterious footprints in Devonshire. It may perhaps tend to assist the curious in their investigation of the mysterious footprints seen in Devonshire to state, through the medium of your respectable paper, that footprints, corresponding in every respect with those given in the Illustrated News, were observed near the Alton railway station and also in some of the gardens in the village on the same morning that they were so extensively traced on both the banks of the River Exe. If the same mysterious being paid a nocturnal visit to the Altonians while he was so much engaged on the banks of the Exe, then he must have the power of ubiquity, or, like Sir Boyle Roche's bird, he must be in 2 places at the same time. It may, however, throw some light on the subject to state that in one place there appeared to be, near the footprints, a mark on the snow, such as would be made by the wing of a bird when rising to fly. Professor Owen, zoologist, proclaimed the prints to be those of a badger. Some curiosity and superstitious alarms were felt here before the thaw commenced by the discovery of footprints in the snow exactly resembling those described to have been in Devonshire, as if some unknown animal with a single foot and cloven hoof had traversed in a straight line miles of hill and dale, deterred by no difficulties of ascent, declivity or hedges. The Illustrated News devoted a long description and an engraving to the footprints, and those seen in his neighbourhood were traced for a considerable way across the fields, and at the Longman, and again at the Crown, near the house of A. Bartaff. Many of our townsmen went to see the phenomenon, and one brought home a lump of the snow in which the footprints were strongly impressed, exhibiting it as a very curious and mysterious occurrence. The cloven hoof had an ominous and by no means prepossessing look. Fortunately, however, an observant naturalist had already examined the footprints and decided the point. Some animal, probably a hare or polecat, had traversed the field at a gallop with its feet close together. The paws had become slightly filled with snow so that only the round form was impressed, and the open space between them left a slightly raised and pointed mark, just like the centre of a cloven hoof. This gentleman followed the track till, on ascending a slope, the animal appeared to have slackened its pace into a trot, and then left upon the snow distinct impressions of its 4 feet. Further on, the animal seems to have sat down on the snow, and again its 4 feet were distinctly traced. Nothing more was desired, the mystery was traced. Inverness Courier, the distinguished zoologist Professor Owen, to whom drawings of the footprints have been submitted, has pronounced them to be those of a badger. And here's his letter to the Illustrated London News. An esteemed zoological friend has submitted to me a carefully executed drawing of one of the more perfect impressions left in the snow at Luscombe, South Devon, on or about the 8th of last month. It was of the hind foot of a badger. This is almost the only plantigrade quadruped we have in this island, and it leaves a footprint larger than would be supposed from its size. The sketch of which you have given a cut gives a correct general idea of the shape and proportion of these footprints, but without the indications of the pads on the sole and the 5 small claws, which the drawing sent to me exhibited. Such perfect footprints were rare, because those of the fore and hind foot are commonly more or less blended together, producing the appearance of a line of single footsteps, which appearance, if a bear had been abroad in 5 winter months spent by your correspondent in Canada, would have shown him was not particular to the footsteps of man, but characteristic of other plantigrade animals, though they may be quadrupedal. The badger sleeps a good deal in his winter retreat, but he doesn't hibernate so regularly and completely as a bear would in the severer climate of Canada. The badger is nocturnal. It comes abroad occasionally in the late winter when hard pressed by cold and hunger, and it's a stealthy prowler, and most active and enduring in its quest for food. That one and the same animal should have gone over 100 miles of a most devious and irregular route in one night is as improbable as that one badger only should have been awake and hungry out of the number concealed in the 100 miles of rocky and bosky Devonshire, which has been startled by the impressions revealed by the rarely spread carpet of snow in that beautiful country. The onus of the proof that one creature made them in one night rests with the asserter, who ought to have gone over the same ground with a power of acute and unbiased observation, which seems not to have been exercised by him who failed to distinguish the truly single from the blended footprints in question. Nothing seems more difficult than to see a thing as it really is, unless it be the right interpretation of observed phenomena. Another naturalist, Frank Buckland, rejected the entire badger theory and suggested that the tracks were from a raccoon. Here's a comparison published many years later in the Lion Times in August 75, which was actually taken from a book, which I will get into in a moment. You can see here that A is the drawing that was published in a magazine at the time that attempted to show how the footprints might have been made by a leaping rat in figure A. Figure B is the impression of the hind foot of an otter. Figure C is the impression of a badger's foot. And figure D is the drawing of one of these mysterious footmarks. How about a mouse, or indeed field mice? This from the Illustrated London News, December of 1964. Snow is unusual in South Devon, which lies so close to the toe of southwestern England, near what is sometimes called the English Riviera, but during the night of February 7th, 1855, there was a fall of snow overnight in the Exeter area. In the morning, the people awoke to find a series of tracks in the snow that baffled them, and has baffled everybody ever since. The first report of this event was printed in the Times for February the 16th of that year, and from it we learned that there was a vast number of prints in the snow looking like the imprints of a donkey's hoof. Each imprint was directly in front of the other, and at regular intervals of 8 inches. The tracks were said to have started suddenly and have finished abruptly, and they were estimated to have extended over a total distance of about 100 miles. Many attempts have been made to explain these tracks: badger, otter, rat, polecat and frog. Birds were suggested, especially to account for the way the river exit appeared to have been crossed, but whilst it's easy to conceive of a bird flying 100 miles in a night, not even an ostrich could run this distance in the time. Naturalist Mr. Lucia drew attention to the way that the tracks of the hind feet of four-footed animals register sometimes with those of the forefeet, the accuracy of the registering being dependent upon age, sex and the method of locomotion used, whether the animal is walking, running, trotting, galloping or leaping. Then he showed how a field mouse, jumping or leaping over the ground, set its 4 feet together each time it touched the ground, in such a way as to leave a U-shaped track. Normally in such tracks there is a slight space at the base of the U, but sometimes this space is large enough to suggest a cloven hoof, rather than a horseshoe. Putting it at its lowest, this is the most plausible explanation so far advanced. It was also feasible. A natural question is to ask why, if this explanation is correct, have the devil's hoof marks not been reported from other places? The answer is that they have. Usually by naturalists who either have not heard of the Devon phenomenon or have failed to connect to the two things. They've also been seen by other people whose attention was excited by them. My attention has been drawn to 2 such occurrences which were not recorded in the press, the details being given me in letters. There was a third when 2 years ago Mrs. Stephanie Ryder telephoned me to say that she had seen similar imprints on the roofs in Godalming in Surrey. Snow is sufficiently infrequent in South Devon that anything associated with it would be something of a novelty and would be calculated to attract attention, and there is the more important point that usually the tracks of apodemus, i.e. the field mouse, show the 4 feet spaced out and the toe marks visible. So why so many U marks on this one night? It may be that the depth or the quality of the snow on this occasion in Devon caused the majority of the field mice to leap about instead of run, or it may be that their unfamiliarity with snow alone caused them to do so. It may even be that this has always happened with apodemus at the first fall of snow, that it normally passes unobserved, and that the event in South Devon would have passed unnoticed but for the presence there of a particularly observant inhabitant. Field mice are numerous. They are also mainly nocturnal. They are particularly active foragers, and they are known to kangaroo over the ground. They are adept climbers that not infrequently climb bushes and trees, and are also known to scale walls and scamper over roofs. They also forage under gooseberry bushes or espalier fruit trees, and it would be asking too much to suppose any one of them swam the 2 miles across the river, but the tracks observed there could have been pure coincidence. In any event, it's difficult to believe that anyone made the trip across the river especially to check this, or if they did, how could they be sure that the tracks on one side were exactly opposite those on the other? In fact, the more one thinks about it, once this simple explanation has been suggested, the more the idea commends itself. All we have to do then is to think not in terms of one animal having travelled 100 miles in one night, but of 100 or more animals having moved about over a total distance of about a mile each, which is not at all unreasonable for small animals as active as field mice. It seems cut and dry, doesn't it, if you look at it that way, but it's also just another explanation that sounds good. I think we could look at sublimation at this stage. It's something I've come across many times during my research on Yeti and Bigfoot footprints in the snow. Sublimation is the process where a solid transitions directly into a gas without passing through that sort of middle liquid phase. In the case of snow or ice, this happens when the snow evaporates directly into water vapour. For example, the temperature's really low, but there's, sunlight there and wind blowing as well. It can just vanish. This process can alter the appearance of snowy surfaces, and including footprints, in subtle and, significant ways. As snow sublimates, the footprint's surrounding area might gradually erode or disappear, which would cause the footprint to appear much larger than it actually was. Uneven sublimation around different bits of a footprint can cause parts of the print to become more prominent, while others fade away, giving the impression that the print is more defined, or has unusual characteristics, or maybe looks like toes, or something like that. The famous Yeti footprint photo, among other things, is said to be the process of sublimation in action, with this toe area sort of melting out, whereas the rest of the print didn't. FYI, I think it's a Yeti footprint, because I believe in that thing. But anyway, by understanding sublimation, it becomes clearer how otherwise normal animal tracks could actually take on otherworldly or exaggerated appearances. But in the 1928 book titled Oddities, A Book of Unexplained Facts by Rupert T. Gould, there is mention of a person writing into the Times as an eyewitness of the original event, and this person says, "The effect of the atmosphere, aka sublimation, upon these marks is given by many as a solution, but how could it be possible for the atmosphere to affect one impression and not another? On the morning that the above were observed, the snow bore the fresh marks of cats, dogs, rabbits, birds, and men clearly defined. Why then should a continuous track be the only one which was affected by the atmosphere, and all the others were left as they were?" Many believe this was no earthly creature. The belief that the devil himself had visited Devon during the night took hold of the population. In Victorian England, superstition was still deeply embedded in the collective psyche, and the image of cloven hoofs, long associated with the red man, seemed a fitting explanation to many. I wondered if it might have been a low-flying hot air balloon, you know, dragging a rope or a tether or something, and it was hitting the ground at regular intervals as this balloon flew overhead. That might have explained the dotted line or the single line tracks. But I mean, it's possibly unlikely, isn't it? The prints themselves are quite deep and uniform, and a rope, I don't know, it'd have a light touch. It probably would sway side to side, wouldn't it, as well? The tracks wouldn't necessarily be in a straight line, and there would be drag marks, I assume. More fanciful ideas have also been proposed. Could a time traveller moving between dimensions or through time itself have left these marks? Or perhaps the prints were made by an extraterrestrial visitor, its strange technology leaving behind traces that we had misinterpreted as hoofprints. Some have even wondered whether the footprints were left by a creature from another dimension, briefly passing through our world and leaving only its physical traces behind. One reader wrote a letter to the Daily Mirror in 1983 recounting the tale to say that he thought it was the work of Romanes. Now, I've got a feeling this next article contains some derogatory terms, but I am reading from the source material, so I'm including everything. Okay. Danny Smith, who describes himself as Travelling Gentleman, County of Herefordshire, writes, "Graham, the reader who suggested that the mystery footprints which appeared in the snow one February night in 1855 were the work of the Romanes, was right. As he said, Didikais and Pikeys had been given the true Romanes a bad name in the area. So a meeting of 7 Romani tribes was called, and they drew up a plan to teach the Didikais a lesson. The whole operation took 15 months to prepare, walking over the route, getting to know the local people and their habits, allotting various jobs to different Romani camps, and so on. Came the night of February 8, 1855, the night of the Mulo (brackets devil), the first Romanis to go out with the lookouts. Then came the stilt treaders. There were 400 sets of stilts, and each had a pair of hoofprints at the base. Every stilt treader had to be fit and athletic. Each was told how far to go before handing over to the next, and so on, until all 400 stiltmen had done their part. After that, a clean-up team went out to make sure that there were no telltale marks left to show what had gone on. As a result of the prank, neither the Didikais nor the Pikeys went near that part of the country for years, and February 8 was known to them as the night of the Mulo's Walk. Now, is this guy kidding or what? So many people might be tempted here to cite Occam's razor, to say something like the simplest explanation is the one to go with, and in turn therefore throw out this idea. However, that isn't actually how Occam's razor really works. Occam's razor suggests that when you're faced with 2 explanations for the same thing, and both explain it equally well, then you should go with the one that makes the fewest assumptions. In science, Occam's razor is more of a helpful guideline for developing theories, rather than a strict rule for deciding between different models. Now, I blame the Big Bang Theory for the adoption and apparent ubiquity of It's Occam's razor as an explanation. I think rather than Occam's razor, we can rely on mere common sense, can we not, to boot this theory from the list of possible origins of the footprints. Maybe it was a cat. This from the Liverpool Echo of September 1954. Today there is no one alive in that part of the country who can possibly remember that long ago February morning, but with the help of the Devonshire County Librarian at Exeter, I have managed to find one statement which does carry the stamp of authenticity. Admittedly, it was made by an old lady nearly 70 years after the event, but at least we know her to be a real person and her observation to be first-hand. She is Miss Henrietta Fursdon, daughter of the Reverend Edward Fursdon, the Vicar of Dawlish at the time. In 1923 she wrote, "I myself remember distinctly seeing the footprints and my terror as a child of the unknown wild beast that might be lurking about, and the servants would not go out after dark to shut the outer doors." She recalled that the footprints were all over Dawlish, and that on Friday morning her father, as vicar, was visited by his curates and church wardens who wanted to ask his opinion about them. They were able to examine closely a track which ran from the vicarage to the vestry door. She confirmed the story of them going straight up to walls and being found on the other side. Miss Fursdon also put forward an explanation that she'd heard at the time of how the footprints were made, that they were a cat's paw marks, which, with the thaw and light rain, were partly washed away before the sharp frost rose and then expanded prints in the shape resembling a small hoof. This certainly fits in with the known weather conditions on that night, but does not explain what induced so many cats to leave their warm firesides. It's almost easier to believe that, as in Coleridge's poem, the devil left his brimstone bed at the break of day to visit his snug little farm on the earth to see how his stock was faring. Maybe it was the cats chasing all the field mice. What about a kangaroo then? Exeter and Plymouth Gazette of December 1928 says, "On the following Sunday proceeds the narrative published in the Times." This is referring to the Times of the day after the actual event. The Reverend Mr. Musgrave alluded to the subject in his sermon and suggested the possibility of the footprints being those of a kangaroo, but this could hardly have been the cause as they were found on both sides of the estuary. At present it remains a mystery, and many superstitious people in the towns are actually afraid to go outside at night. And you might think, hang on, kangaroos in England? Well, apparently this suggestion was put forward due to somebody called a Mr. Fish in Sidmouth having a private menagerie that housed 2 kangaroos. What can I say? But a kangaroo's got a tail, hasn't it, that would have surely made patterns or even just wiped footprints out in snow, wouldn't it? So while all of these theories provide tantalising possibilities and each one struggles to just completely explain the mystery, it's unlikely that a single animal, machine or natural process could account for the sheer consistency, scale and the winding path of these footprints. Birds don't leave hoof marks, and if the prints are a normal animal, then why weren't these seen every time it snowed? Why are these prints causing such a stir? The footprints were observed to have been cloven and bipedal, 2 characteristics that rarely appear together in local wildlife. Certainly most cloven-hoofed animals in England, deer and livestock, what have you, they walk on 4 legs, don't they? They leave a very different pattern. This straight single-file line with what sounds like consistent spaces between the prints made it look like these things were made by a bipedal creature. If it had been a common local animal like a deer or fox, the villagers would have recognised the tracks, wouldn't they? Unless they were sublimated to all hell and just didn't resemble anything. But even bipedal animals, you know, even us, humans, we typically leave a sort of staggered line of footprints, don't we? This occurs because, well, your feet alternate, don't they? And there's a gap because of the width of your hips, and your feet sort of point outwards a little bit as well. It's not straight, flat, single-file tracks, is it? It's more of a zigzag. You can get single-file tracks in some quadrupedal animals, especially when they move through deep snow. Cats and hares sometimes place their hind feet exactly where the front feet have landed. They call this direct registering or perfect registering. But even in these cases, the tracks wouldn't appear to move perfectly straight through obstacles, like walls, and over rooftops, surely. The tracks went across rooftops, climbed walls, they went over haystacks, through gardens. without breaking stride once. No local animal, especially one as large as something with hoofs, would have been able to navigate this terrain seamlessly. It seems to sort of defy normal animals' involvement in a way. And the sheer distance as well, 100 miles worth of tracks, if it's a single animal, it's a bloody long way, isn't it, overnight? Interestingly, Devon's not the only place where these sort of prints have been found. Over the years, similar cases have emerged around the world, and each one echoing the strange mystery of 1855. In 1978, in Turek, Poland, villagers reported finding hoof-like prints in the snow that stretched for miles. Much like the Devon case, the prints seemed to cross obstacles with ease, and no clear explanation was ever found. In 1945, in the village of Acle, Norfolk, residents found hoof-like prints in the snow, again on rooftops and crossing rivers, once again in a straight line, and impossible terrain was covered, rooftops and haystacks, and just it didn't seem plausible. In the rural areas of Brazil, reports of a strange cloven footprint which date back to the 1840s are abound, when locals believed they were the work of a jumping devil. These marks also just appeared overnight and stretched across great distances. And of course there's the good old Jersey Devil, isn't there? In 1909, during the infamous Jersey Devil sighting, some strange footprints appeared in the snow across parts of New Jersey. Witnesses reported seeing hoof-like tracks that seemed to vanish into thin air with no known creature responsible. Apparently there was a similar case in Holland as well, as I learned when I was looking at the newspaper articles here. Sir, I was much interested to read your account about the devil's footprint in the snow in Holland in 1913. I had never heard of this instance, though I had read of the instance of this phenomenon on Kerguelen Island. I can't find the account that's referenced here, sadly, but a bit of digging tells me that these prints closely resembled those found in Devon, and it was 1913, and the footprints were discovered in the village of Amersfoort, and like the Devon case, they appeared overnight in fresh snowfall. The prints were described as cloven hoof marks, and they extended over a large distance, passing through fields, over walls and through gardens, much like the earlier Devon case. Witnesses reported that the tracks appeared to travel in straight lines, sometimes seeming to pass through solid obstacles such as fences and hedges, an eerie similarity to the Devon incident. And I assume Kerguelen Island is a typo and means Kerguelen Islands, but I'm not sure. Let's engage in a bit of speculative zoology, shall we, and imagine an animal that might have evolved the traits necessary to leave these prints behind. This hypothetical species might have evolved in isolated, cold, mountain regions or islands. I mean, Kerguelen Island is pretty remote, isn't it? Or the remote highlands of ancient Europe or something like that. Over millions of years, these creatures could have adapted to snowy, uneven terrain and possibly to periods of environmental stress, where food was scarce, for example, which might necessitate long-distance foraging over particularly difficult landscapes. It would possess elongated, strong hind limbs with specialised joints that help it move along in efficient strides, leaving just a single straight line of hoof-like prints in the snow. The hoofs themselves might be an adaptation for energy conservation or, grip, or, I don't know, maybe they can act like snowshoes, making the surface area and the weight-bearing part of the animal not press down so much into the snow, but then again, we're talking about it leaving footprints, right? The hoofs could be for grip, so if it's rocky, look at mountain goats, right? If it's rocky terrain and things like that, maybe that's what hoofs are for. It'd have to be lightweight to allow it to cross rooftops and narrow surfaces without breaking through, but it still has to be capable of leaving deep prints in the snow, so that you're looking at some sort of evolutionary balance between mass and strength for that to work. Like birds of prey are quite heavy, but they're still, hollow boned, for example, which gives it an overall lighter frame, but still, strong. Maybe it had spring-loaded tendons, which could allow for, really quick and efficient movement, similar to a kangaroo, essentially. Given its evolution in cold, resource-scarce environments, this creature could have evolved to become a nocturnal forager. That might help it avoid predators, which would probably give it some big eyes so that it could see at night. It could leap from rooftops to walls and across rivers with real agility, and it could indeed have evolved this perfect registering gait. What would such a creature be doing here? Well, the creature could have been migratory, like certain reindeer or birds, or people think Bigfoot is, adapted to travel across long distances looking for food. Now, if there was unusually harsh weather, which if it never snows in Devon and suddenly it did, then there might have been, then this could be a rare or unknown species that normally lived elsewhere, but was driven further afield in its search for prey. The idea of animals getting lost during normal migration isn't unheard of. Seals and whales get stranded, don't they? And a lot of creatures, when food sources become scarce, tend to wander or sort of explore new territories, don't they? Maybe this creature left its home environment because there's just no food left. And maybe harsh weather contributed to that as well. Lions do it, don't they? Wolves do it. They go searching new areas when the food runs out. I don't know. I mean, look at this thing. I think if you added wings to this, it'd be more interesting. And it would let it migrate from further away and across the sea, cross rivers easily, wouldn't it? And there were no additional prints suggesting the presence of any arms. It makes sense to envision the creature without them, or maybe with little T-Rex-like appendages. This would make this creature more streamlined and specialised for movement, but I don't know, it just starts getting weirder the more you think about it, doesn't it? What about an underground creature? In an entirely speculative sense, the idea that cave systems might stretch, I don't know, across continents or connect through, underground passages. It's a popular trope in folklore and mystery fiction, certainly. Some theories propose the existence of ancient lost underground networks and subterranean civilizations. There's plenty of caves down in that part of the country. And there's folklore relating to those caves as well. There's the Tommyknockers, right? These mythical creatures which are believed to inhabit caves and mines across Devon and Cornwall. Knockers, or Tommyknockers, were thought to be small, sort of goblin-like creatures who lived underground, particularly in tin mines and caves. They were often said to knock on the walls of mines as a warning of impending cave-ins, but some also believe that they led miners to rich veins of ore, and in a more malevolent version of the legend, the knockers might mislead miners or cause them harm, similar to some of the stories told in Troller's Gill. Or pixies, down that end of the country, Devon and all that area. The folklore is the pixie, right? The small fairy-like creatures that are said to live in hidden places like caves and hills and forests. They're generally portrayed as playful and mischievous. They're often connected to, sort of liminal spaces, aren't they? These places that exist between worlds, sort of thing. So, caves might count as that, or some sort of cave-like dimension, or burial mounds and stuff like that, and weird natural features that just feel like they're not quite of this world. And of course, a subterranean creature might have evolved this single-file gait because there might be a lot of narrow spaces down there, and if you're narrow and you can walk 1 foot directly in front of the other, you're going to be able to navigate narrow, more treacherous ledges and natural outcrops, aren't you? Anyway, enough of that. We could speculate all day. It fascinates me. So over 160 years later, the Devil's Footprints remain one of the most compelling and unexplained mysteries in history. From Devon to Poland, Belgium, Brazil and beyond, these strange prints continue to challenge our understanding of the world. Theories abound, from rational explanations like animals and weather to the more imaginative ideas of time travellers, extraterrestrial visitors, and weird, unknown creatures. Nothing, however, fully unravels the mystery. Even if you want to tend towards the grounded and based theories, a lot of them don't quite cut it to explain what happened. What walked across the snowy fields of Devon that night? Was it the devil, leaving a trail of fear behind him? Was it a trick of nature? Or was it something else altogether? Something we still don't have the words or the understanding to describe. As we look back on this case, one thing's clear. Sometimes the greatest mysteries lie not in the moment, but in the questions we continue to ask. What do you think about this one? You let me know in the comment section below, please. Hit the like button, it's the thumbs up button in the corner there. And please share this video with your friends and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Bye for now.